Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you my winter reading recommendations. So winter is my favorite season of all time. So it is definitely my favorite, also like my favorite reading season as well. I'm a December baby, so I feel like I just really love the cold weather. I love kind of the stillness of like snow falling and just the cold winter night where it's just dark. And I really love books that kind of capture that winter feeling. So I have a variety of books that either kind of take place in the winter time that capture like that cold stillness of like winter, or I read around kind of, you know, winter time or the holiday season that I feel like I just always associate with winter time. And they're kind of all over in terms of genre as well, so I'm excited to share these with you. So without further ado, let's get started. So first up, I have Winter Garden by Kristin, and this is one that I feel like just really captures that like cold winter time, like the brutalness of like winter basically. So this follows two sisters who kind of have a very kind of a strange relationship with their parents, but when their father falls ill and on his deathbed he demands that his wife, who doesn't really have a good relationship with their daughter, kind of tell them her truth and like her story. And so she tells her daughter her story of kind of growing up in Russia during World War II and her experience kind of with all that stuff and her struggle with survival. And obviously with like the Russian winter, especially during World War II, was brutal and terrifying, and this story does not shy away from the hardships that those people had to go through during this time period. And I feel like this book really captures that like cold brutality of winter. And this is kind of before, this was written way before the Nightingale came out and before I feel like Kristin really became popular. But I feel like this is on par or to the same, you know, caliber as like the Nightingale, the Women, like all her books that I feel like she is like kind of most known for. I feel like this one kind of has a lot of similar themes of really focusing on women's stories like during, you know, history that kind of get forgotten to the history books because we just kind of focus on the men. And so this book was really interesting and also kind of tackles the complexities of mother-daughter relationships, and it also kind of has that World War II kind of parallel storyline between past and present. So I think if you like the Nightingale, I think if you like Kristin Hannah's like other popular books, I think you would really like this as well. And I feel like it's one that's forgotten, but just on the cover alone, I feel like it is like a winter read. So definitely something that I really enjoy, and I think you guys would enjoy as well. Next up, this is kind of just like focusing on the kind of cold wintertime feeling, and I feel like that's the perfect time for like a murder mystery or a type of like suspenseful thriller type book. And first up, I have kind of The Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I read this, I want to say during the pandemic, and I really enjoyed it. So it follows this detective who is in Philadelphia, and there's kind of this opioid crisis going on, but there are these string of murders that are taking place that there's something suspicious about them. They're made to look like opioid overdoses, but there's something else going on. So not only is this detective trying to kind of figure out what's going on, but her sister, who is also a drug addict, has gone missing, so that's kind of going on as well. So in addition to kind of this present day like crime investigation, murder mystery type thing, we also get flashback to the sisters when they were younger, growing up with their mother who had, you know, substance abuse issues, and eventually kind of what led to the sisters kind of getting, the one sister kind of becoming a drug addict as well. But this book was super suspenseful. I think it really captures that like cold winter, just like how the ground is hard and just like the heart, like coldness, the brutalness of winter. And I feel like this really captures that like feeling, I guess, of like the darker side, not like the pretty snow falling, but like, you know, the dark nights, the cold evenings, like the ice on the ground and all those things. And this book was super suspenseful. I really loved, if you like, I know like The God in the Woods or The God of the Woods, which came out this past year by this author, really blew up, but I feel like I enjoyed this one slightly more. So if you really enjoyed that book, I think you would like this. And I feel like winter is the perfect time to really dive into this as well. So like I said, highly recommend this one. Next up, this is a book that I feel like just I read around the winter time. Like I read this, I think I finished it on like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or something. I know I finished it Christmas Eve, and it just makes me think of that. But it kind of takes place in Toronto, so I guess like, you know, I'm from there, and I just always think of going home to visit my family in Toronto over Christmas time, so maybe that's why, in addition to kind of reading it over Christmas and stuff. But I have Looking for Jane by Heather Marshall. I think this is probably one of the most prominent and important books I've ever read, but it covers like a bunch of different storylines. So we have 2017, 1971, and 1980, but basically the premise of the modern day story is this person works at this antique store, and when she's there she finds this letter that was left in one of the like things that was donated to kind of the antique store, and she finds that it was a letter written by someone's mother to their daughter on her deathbed, basically explaining that she was adopted. And so kind of with that present day storyline, so then we also follow kind of this kind of later storyline where we follow two friends who are kind of sent to this institution because they are, you know, unwed people that are pregnant, and so this is where they were kind of sent to go. So we follow their friendship, kind of living in this like situation. And then we also follow a Dr. Evelyn Taylor, who is a kind of underground abortion doctor during the time when abortion was banned in Canada. So it kind of follows the underground movement as well. But I think especially with recent political events within the United States and how women's rights to their bodies is very much kind of a big pivotal point, and kind of having that right stripped away and the right to abortion can lead to all these issues. And I feel like this book really tackles with a lot of those themes and the horrors of this time, and how we are kind of going cyclically back to this time where women weren't granted that, and what are the issues that arise when women aren't allowed to make decisions about their bodies. So it was definitely really interesting, and I think, like I said, this is very powerful. And one of the other themes I really liked about this is how there's no like right or wrong way for kind of motherhood, and how it's defined, and how motherhood can be different things. It doesn't have to be biologically motherhood, but like the roles that mother have with you know their children that may not be biologically their own, but how motherhood is not defined by one thing. And yeah, this book blew me away. I read it, like I said, towards the end of last year, and I think it's just a really important read. Again, I read it around the holiday season, so maybe that's why I associate it with winter, but again, I think this is a book that everyone in their lifetime needs to read. This one I feel like has the kind of wintry vibes of like the cold, you know, forest that's like dead, like backdrop we're getting here on like a cold day with, there's a little bit of snow falling actually, but this is a book that I read towards the end of December, and I was obsessed. Like, I finished the first book and I immediately had to go to the bookstore to get the second one, and it is the what is it called, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. And this is a book that took me by surprise. I picked up the first book, it was like one of the free or like buy one get one books from Barnes and Noble, so I kind of splurged and eventually got the like collector's editions of this from Barnes and Noble. But basically the premise, it takes place in this fantastical world where there is this mist that is kind of taking over this kingdom, and if you get infected by this mist, you get some sort of magical power or eventually kind of go crazy. So people who are infected, who get these kind of magical powers, are killed off. And the magic system of this is interesting because it's people who kind of have these cards that are kind of very much foundational to the lore of this kingdom end up can use those powers. So we can be invisible or like these type of things based on the powers. If you ever seen Card Captors, it's very similar to that. Like, I watched that as a kid, but maybe that's why I liked it. But there's kind of this bigger plot that goes on, but it's really interesting, and I think it's kind of best to kind of go into this not knowing too much about it. But like I said, I was obsessed. It was a duology, all the books are out. I marathoned them towards the end of the year, and I think this is just a fantasy that I think it does rely on a lot of tropes, but I think the tropes are done well, so it makes it really fun and interesting. And like I said, I really enjoyed it, so I think it's best kind of just go in not knowing anything, but you know, take my word for it. And lastly, this is, I feel like, just the perfect winter fantastical read, and it is The Bear and the Nightingale trilogy by Katherine Arden. This takes place in kind of medieval Russia, where we follow this girl. The first book kind of chronicles her like early bringing her like birth basically to kind of being a young woman, and she kind of lives in a time in Russia where a lot of like the folklorian creatures or kind of like the folklore of Russia was very much still kind of prevalent. So she has the ability where she can actually see these kind of folklore creatures that most people cannot see. But there is kind of the elements of, you know, religion coming in and kind of taking away from those kind of folklore themes. And then also there is kind of this dark, what is known as the bear, that is kind of, you know, causing havoc on this town. It kind of goes from there. I think this is definitely one of my favorite fantastical trilogies of all time. I will say, like, the first 100 pages or so of this book are challenging to get through, but once you kind of get past that, like, info dump and, like, the first, you know, couple, you know, teenage years, like, of the birth of the character to her, like, teenage years, it definitely gets a lot better, and each book just gets better and better. And just the atmosphere of that cold, you know, Russian winter during this time period was a lot of fun. I love the folklore elements, I love the character development, and this is one that I said you have to take my word for it. It's a little hard to get into the first little bit, but it definitely, the payoff is definitely worth it. So if you can get through the first 100 pages or so, I think it's definitely worth your while. And I feel like this is just really captures that winter feeling. So again, this is the perfect time of year to read this. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your winter reading recommendations are and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.